When FBI agent Earl Pitts was arrested by his fellow agents and charged with selling secrets to the Soviets, it sent shockwaves through the country's top law enforcement agency. It was only the second time in the FBI's 90-year history that one of its own had been exposed as a spy. It was a particularly bitter pill for the Bureau to swallow because while the FBI thought Earl Pitts was gathering intelligence on Soviet spies, he was actually selling the FBI's own intelligence to those same Russian agents. So why did Earl Pitts do it? Was it ideology, greed, sex? Well, see what you think as Earl Pitts explains how he became a spy.
I was awake one morning, early one morning, about 4 in the morning, and it was just a total change. It had gone from something that I really wouldn't even consider to suddenly now it was something that really could be done.
4 o'clock in the morning, this just comes to you?
Yeah, it was that sudden.
Earl Pitts is now locked up here at the federal prison in Butner, North Carolina, where he is serving a 27-year sentence for espionage. To those who know him, it's an unlikely ending for a man who seemed to have all the right credentials for a successful career at the FBI. Pitts was raised on a farm in the tiny rural town of Urbana, Missouri, a town steeped in the conservative ideals of the Midwest.
What kind of values did your family have? What did they instill in you?
I think what people would consider the traditional values: patriotism, hard work.
Pitts took those values and built an impressive resume. He was the first member of his family to graduate from college. He joined the ROTC, was a captain in the Army, earned a master's degree and a law degree. And then, in 1983, he landed a job at the FBI. Soon after that, he met and married his wife, Mary.
He was very loving and very giving, and I really felt like I had a best friend. We could share everything together.
Did you think that he was well suited to that work, to being an FBI agent?
I thought, yeah, he's definitely suited for this because of his morals, because of his values, because of the way he was raised.
When he would leave in the morning to go to work, tell me what he would say.
That he was going off to save America.
But then, in 1987, the story of Earl Pitts veered sharply off course. Why? If you can believe it, Pitts says because the FBI transferred him to New York City.
How did you and your wife find New York City?
It was expensive, dirty, and a lot of crime, a lot of people, very congested.
So you didn't like it?
I didn't care for it, no.
What Pitts didn't care for was this: the noise, the crowds, the traffic of New York City. And what's more, Pitts says the FBI assigned him to the most challenging job in the Bureau, identifying and tracking down suspected Soviet spies. But they expected him to make ends meet on his FBI salary of $38,000 a year.
I became increasingly, I guess the word would be angry with the bureaucracy of the FBI.
Why were you angry at the FBI?
They were telling us this is the most important work in the Bureau. On the other hand, they were essentially saying, but we're not going to bother to support you.
You didn't like the city where you lived. You weren't being paid as much as you would have liked. Weren't you going through the same thing that just about everybody goes through at the beginning of their career?
Well, certainly a number of other agents were going through these same problems that I was experiencing also. I mean, I'm not trying to say that my situation was unique.
You decided you had to take some action. What did you decide to do?
Well, eventually I took steps to get in contact with a KGB officer.
What pushed you over that line?
It just seemed like a natural progression of things.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. A natural progression. Look at the way you were raised. Look at your background, ROTC, in the military, and law school with the FBI. It's a natural progression to sell your country's secrets to the Soviet Union?
It didn't strike me as unusual at that time. It didn't strike me as something to question.
Was it that you decided that this was a way to get back at the FBI?
I think that was probably a big part of it.
To get back at the FBI for transferring him to New York, Earl Pitts wrote a letter to a diplomat in the Soviet mission offering information. And he enclosed one page from a classified FBI document to show that he meant business. It was here on the second floor of the New York Public Library that diplomat introduced Pitts to a high-ranking KGB agent who would become his handler. And for the next 5 years, Pitts sold just about everything that came across his desk to the KGB. Tom Picard is head of the criminal division at the FBI.
There's nothing worse you can do than betray your friends. And Earl betrayed us. He betrayed his co-workers. He betrayed the entire FBI.
Did he do damage to the FBI's counterintelligence operations?
Absolutely.
He did it by giving the Soviets inside information on the FBI's counterintelligence activities, even after the FBI transferred him out of New York to Washington. One of the documents he turned over was a secret FBI list of known KGB spies operating in the United States.
How did he get away with it? I mean, here's a guy surrounded by other agents working in counterintelligence, and nobody knew what he was doing.
He was good at it. He learned his lessons well about how to avoid detection. He did not walk up and down the hallways and try to pick up the trash or try to rifle through computer systems or anything like that.
For all the risks involved, you'd think Pitts would have demanded a lot of money, but he didn't. The Soviets paid him less than $130,000 in cash, and although they told Pitts there was another $100,000 set aside for him in a bank account in Moscow, he never saw any of that.
What did he do with the money that he was paid?
He squandered it on lunches, meals, small vacations and things like that. He didn't have lobster every night. He went to the Red Lobster. It was his idea of having lobster.
Then something happened that Earl Pitts didn't anticipate. The Soviet Union collapsed, the Cold War ended, and that Russian diplomat he first contacted back in 1987, well, he didn't want to go back home. He was now looking for a green card, a government permit to live and work in the United States. So he offered the FBI Earl Pitts.
He told us that an American FBI agent had volunteered to the Russian service in '87.
Acting on that tip, the FBI launched a full-scale investigation, and in August of '95 began what the Bureau calls a false flag operation.
That's an effort we use in the intelligence area where we have one of our agents pretend to represent another country and in effect pretend to fly the colors of another flag, just as ships did back in the 19th century.
To try to fool the other guy.
Right, which is what happened with Earl. He thought he was actually dealing with the Russians.
And one day a Russian showed up unannounced on Pitt's doorstep. It was his original Soviet contact, the diplomat who, unbeknownst to Pitts, had tipped off the FBI and was now working for them. Mary Pitts was stunned by her husband's reaction to the man at the door.
He was in a total panic. He was sweating profusely. He was pale. He was someone I'd never seen before. I had never seen him in a state anywhere close to that.
What did he say about this guy?
He said he was a real estate agent that wanted to list the house.
That was a story she didn't believe. So Mary Pitts searched Earl's home office and found a letter he had written to his Soviet handlers. For 2 days, she anguished over what to do. She finally decided to bring the letter to the FBI.
There was something drastically wrong, and he just wasn't telling me what it was.
That was clear.
If he was involved in anything illegal, couldn't live with that.
Was it a big step for you?
Yes, I knew that he would be totally devastated that I could go behind his back to someone else. And at that point, I realized my marriage was going to be over one way or the other.
Of course, when Mary Pitts went to the FBI, they already knew about her husband. He had taken the bait, and his handlers, the men he thought were Russian agents, were really undercover FBI agents. Over the next 16 months, they tracked his every move and recorded them on videotape. Here, Pitts is making a drop he thinks is for the Russians. He willingly gave them anything they asked for, including a specially equipped telephone receiver for intercepting communications. He gave them keys to get into the FBI Academy at Quantico and personal data on other FBI agents he thought the Russians might be able to recruit as spies. They were also recording soon after Pitts had received a payment from the FBI undercover agent.
He sat there and counted the money?
Yeah. Sat there and counted it out, put it in individual envelopes.
What was the reaction when you saw that?
It was just devastating to us when we watched that. We always held out a glimmer of hope that it couldn't have happened. It just didn't happen to us. But when he counted that money out, there was no doubt.
Earl Pitts was arrested, pled guilty to espionage, and the judge, unconvinced by his efforts to explain himself, sentenced Pitts to 3 more years than the prosecution had asked.
Do you understand why he became a spy? Do you understand why he did it?
No. All the times we spent with him, he could never explain it. I don't think he can explain why he did it.
He said he was determined to stop the downward slide of his life and to teach the FBI a lesson, so he became a spy. Does that make sense to you?
I think that's a pretty horrible way to teach the FBI a lesson. The best thing to do if you're unhappy in your job is to leave it.
Can you ever forgive him for what he's done to himself, to you, to his family?
No. He can never justify this.
Mary Pitts has filed for a divorce. Earl Pitts has been in prison now for a year. He's had a lot of time to think about what he did.
If you could change anything, what would it be?
I wouldn't have gone to New York.